Hi, all. Good morning. It's so wonderful to be here. I can't believe that we are here in person. Amazing. I had the honor of being part of the last cohort of fellows with the Ad Club. And, Gina always says I give the fellowship too much credit, but I really feel like I wouldn't be here today, standing in the position that I'm in now, if it weren't for the fellowship. Specifically, I see someone here who was incredibly instrumental for me, Shamika Brown, as my executive coach. And I see a couple of my fellows here today. And it's just such a remarkable experience to be poured into in the way that we were, and to have the camaraderie that we had. And the fellowship helped me to see myself, helped me to lean into who I am, who I always knew myself to be, but didn't necessarily have the toolkit for it. So it's an honor to introduce a panel about resilience today as someone who blew her life up and had my fellows to keep me propped up and usher me into this amazing new chapter in my life. So thank you so much, Gina. Thank you to the Ad Club. I'm forever, forever grateful for this experience. It's truly changed my life. And it's an honor to introduce this next panel on resilience. Monique is someone I look up to a great deal, so it's an honor to introduce her and the ladies. Let's have a conversation about resilience. Valerie, Sophie, Bernice, welcome to the stage.
Good morning. Thank you. Welcome, ladies. All right. Well, now that we're all zenned out, thank you so much. I know this is a chatty group, so we probably needed a little mellow. So thank you. Welcome, everyone. Yes, our conversation today is going to be about resilience. And these three amazing women know just a little bit about that. But just as a preamble and kind of an opening salvo to kind of frame this conversation, I wanted to really talk about the fact that we've all been through a great deal. We've been traumatized, so be okay with that. We went through what I call the trisis, which is COVID and mental health, economic instability, and racial and injustice, unrest. So we've got a lot going on, and it's still going on. It's just we're headed into whatever the new normal version of that is. So wanted to talk a little bit about what is resilience, right? The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape or have elasticity. So that's what's in the dictionary. And then successfully adapting to difficult and challenging life experiences. So I think we can all find some comfort in that. We've all been through some version of it. But I also want to talk about their skills of resilience, right? So there are 5 skills of resilience: self-awareness, mindfulness, self-care, positive relationships, and purpose. And I think over the last few years, we've heard a lot about that, probably more than you've ever heard about it at work. You probably think about it more at home or with your therapist or wherever you go to decompress. But now we're saying, oh my gosh, that's a part of work now too. Oh, good Lord. So then we also have to think about what we're talking about, the 7 C's of resilience, which we're going to kind of focus on this panel. The 7 C's of resilience: competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. So those are the 7 areas that we're going to explore during our time together this morning. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Bernice. Bernice, please talk to us a little bit about your resilience journey, and we'll let the rest of the panel follow.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you for having me, Gina. So hi, I'm Bernice Velos. I am going to take you guys to probably a dark time that no one wants to talk about or wants to even remember. I'm going to take you back to March of 2020. So at that point, I was at Publicis Media Group and I had just left because I had been hired at a startup, right, of January of 2020. And so I'm starting this cool new opportunity. The startup was based in the UK, right? So they're trying to establish their presence here in the States. And I'm senior account manager. I'm traveling to the UK. I'm like, this is the best opportunity I could have ever imagined. And I actually was just coming back from a conference with my ad fellows. And I go to the office and they tell us, pack up your stuff, make sure to bring your laptop. You're going to be out of here for like 2 weeks. We'll be back, but, just everybody go home. All right, cool. I'm like, I get to work from home. This is a dream come true. Nice. We're doing this. When like that week passes by, I was again a senior account manager. So one by one, my accounts start pulling all their jobs. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. I'm literally home kind of twiddling my thumbs and I start to get really like nervous and scared. And then sure enough, by the 30th of March, there's this weird 10 a.m. meeting on my calendar. When I dial in, I'm being told I'm laid off. So I just left my stable 4-year career at PM to go to this startup, right, which is a little tricky. And then boom, you're laid off in the middle of this or at the beginning of this global pandemic. No healthcare, no income. I'm living by myself at this point. What do I do? Right. So I'm absolutely devastated. This is the first time I have ever in my life been laid off. Right. And as we're all here, successful, driven women, that is scary for us, scary for me. And what do I do? So the first thing I do, I call my mom. I'm devastated. Right. I'm just bawling. Mom, what do I do? This thing has happened. And my mom's reaction, she's kind of quiet. She's just taking it all in. And she's like, I'm from the Dominican Republic, so I speak Spanish. And she's like, Mija, you'll be fine. Like, let's lean on God. You'll be fine. Don't worry. You're resilient. We'll get through this together. But I kind of expected more support and a little bit more like chatter. And I'm like, Mom, like, this is my life and my career, Right. And push comes to shove. Later that evening, I get a FaceTime from my little brother who lives at home. And he's like, Bernice, we got to take mom to the hospital. Her reaction at that moment, which again, in my own like selfishness, right? I'm devastated, didn't really kind of take in. Well, she's going through something too. Turns out she'd been feeling weird all week. And that same day that I was laid off, my mom is like, I need to go to the hospital. And she's crying too now. She's like, I just don't feel well. I'm absolutely like overwhelmed, right? Don't know what to do. It was one of the worst days I want to say of my life, right? Very scary to have my mom and my 90-year-old grandmother who lives right above them is like, I got to take care of my daughter. And I'm like, no, please stay home, so it's very scary. And again, thank God, she's fine. Everyone's okay. She did have COVID and she actually got it a second time, right? But it's just such a scary time, Monique, right? Like, what do you do? Where do you go? And I leaned into family. I leaned into friends. I leaned into my ad club fellows. Shamika, again, amazing. Shamika was just helping us out through this. And she'd do these like weekly sessions with affirmations and guided meditations that she was doing with us. And I got through it, but it was very scary. And I will say I went through 7 months where I was laid off. And because I was in the first round of layoffs, right? I don't know if you guys remember, unemployment was a hot mess. So for a while, I really was leaning just on my savings. And I will wrap up with this. My little story is that at this point, I'm interviewing, but summer passes by and I really still don't have a job. I'm living by myself. My lease expires in November of that year. And so I tell myself, this is devastating. This is my first apartment. I've lived there, my little studio, you have your cozy spot. It's your apartment. And I'm like, all right, well, this is just not going to be sustainable, right? If I need to go back home until I get my feet on the ground, I will, and things will eventually shift. But I may need to go back home. And I will say in October of 2020, I actually got my job, my dream job, not just a job, but like my dream job, senior manager of multicultural marketing. And I did move, but I did not move back home. I moved closer to Connecticut where my job is now. So that's my story.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice. So Valerie, I want to come to you and I want to talk to you a little bit about resilience and how you've made resilience more of a lifelong effort. So I love that we talked about 2020, but what does it feel like when it's the arc?
Okay. First of all, I wrote a book called Pressure Makes Diamonds. So I have to pretend that I have something to say about resilience at least.
I wish it really did.
Just a little bit. You just
I
know a
wish
little
it really did.
Actually, I think it does. You know, I really believe that.
You need
heard
the
a
COVID
creative
edition
director
now, though.
say that early in my career before I knew that that expression was going to take over the world the way that it has, to a group of creatives who were complaining about not having enough time, not having this, not having that. And it was all true. But he said, pressure makes diamonds, kid. And I thought, well, if I ever become a creative director, I'm going to use that one. So it ended up becoming kind of half of the title of my book. But I was thinking about this panel. I was like, what do I have to say that could really be helpful to someone? You've all been through the pandemic. And if we're lucky, that will be a once in a lifetime event. So I thought, I know that people are going to have stuff to say about that. I want to talk to you about something that is almost certain to happen to every one of you at some point, and that is how to be resilient when you lose a job, because that is very likely to happen to you, and maybe even more than once. I want to talk about 2 times that happened to me, which were completely different. And of the C words that Monique was talking about, the ones that I thought were most germane to my experience have to do with competence, confidence, and connection. You know, when you lose your job, it's no time to lose your confidence. And it's no time to lose your confidence in your competence, because unless you're pretty young in your career, it's highly unlikely that you got fired for being incompetent. There was probably some other reason that you were let go. And those can be myriad. They can have to do with you personally, your personal style. It can have to do with, you know, personality differences with someone that you work with, or it can just be, you know, some sort of institutional thing. Maybe you lost your job in a merger, or, you know, some other kind of craziness. But just remember that you know how to do something, that you have a set of skills, and that those are valuable and they're important, and that you're very likely to land on your feet, as long as you remember that. Move forward with confidence if you can, you know, and also let your connections know what has happened to you, you know, and present it as your version of the events of how you lost your job. One of the things that was very useful to me, and it might be slightly less useful to you if you're earlier in your career, is both of the times that I lost a job, I had a non-compete year ahead of me. And it was a year in which I had to be paid by the company that had let me go, like for a year, which my grandson just never could get over that. The last time I was like, wait a minute, Grandma, so I get this straight. You get paid for not working.
Correct.
It's like, yes, you know, I do. But a non-compete year is also designed in a way to kill your career.
Yes.
Is designed to like lessen your value in the marketplace, because you just disappeared for a year, you know, and it doesn't matter what you did before that year. When you go away for a year, you know, you're gone. But what I found was that it was connections like the Advertising Club, where I was on the board of directors for many years, the pro bono work that I did for the Partnership or Drug Free America, and as a member of the campaigns review committee for the Ad Council, that kept me visible in the industry. So what I would say to you is develop those connections in your career, because they will help you be resilient at those times, whether you have a non-compete year or not. But those things will keep you alive in the industry. What you give to organizations like that, the connections that you make to organizations like that will prove invaluable to you. Deepak Chopra has something that he calls the law of service. And it means that those things that you do without thinking about what you're going to get in return for it often pay off the biggest dividends of all, with things that I just said yes to because somebody asked me, have resulted in wonderful trips, fabulous connections to people in various industries and stuff like that. So what I would say to you is cultivate these things while you have a job, and they will help you when you don't. They will be a key to your resilience. Another thing that I just wanted to say is just because somebody lets you go doesn't mean that you deserve to be let go. I was in a job where I really probably invested just a little bit too much of myself. There should be a limit to what you give if you don't own, because you can always be let go. And even if you are irreplaceable, you will still be replaced. And that is something that I kind of feel happened to me at one point in my career, but it was a very valuable lesson. I'd never do that again. There are limits, to what I would give. So again, you've already lost your job. It's no time to lose your confidence. It is time to work your connections within the industry, and the time to develop those is now, wherever you are in your career. Get involved with the advertising club, get involved with, trying to be involved with the ad council, the partnership for drug-free kids, I think it is now. No, the Partnership to End Addiction is the latest name. But whatever the organization of your choice, do something that is not directly your job, that is pro bono. You will find that you will be given a lot to do, because once you volunteer to do something, those things tend to multiply. But do those things because there's a reason beyond altruism to do them. They will help you. They will keep you resilient as you are buffeted around by this industry that buffets us all around. One of the jobs that I lost, my husband said, your boss, who was the chairman of the company, didn't really think you were wrong. He was just tired of hearing your mouth. And it was the truth. I mean, we've had a complex relationship over a whole bunch of years. When he finally retired, he asked me to speak at his retirement event. And I said that, and he said, "Oh, your husband was a smart man." Because it was the truth. So you can lose a job, not because you're wrong, but just because, it's not the right time, or it's time for you to leave that situation. Or, as happened to me in another time, they simply closed the New York office of the company that I work for. And that can happen to you too. And it will be not your doing at all. You don't have to have said or done anything wrong in the least, but just for business reasons, they don't want your office to exist anymore. So just don't lose your confidence just because you've lost your job. Work your connections, and realize that, as people say, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you. It absolutely was, in every case that it happened to me, the best thing that ever happened to me. That may be hard to see when you're saying, how am I going to exist for 3 months without a job? I don't have 3 months in reserve or whatever, but somehow 3 months will go by. You'll end up in a better place, and you go, wow, I thought that was a terrible thing, but losing that situation was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I grew from it. I showed that I could live through it, that I am resilient, that I still have the skills and the confidence that will cause someone else to hire me, realize my value, and bring me into a situation that's better than the one that I left.
Thank you so much, Valerie. So I know I just got back from Cape Town, and I was in Cape Town City Hall where Mandela spoke right after he got out of jail. And one of the things that I love, one of my favorite quotes from him is that I don't lose. I either win or I learn. right?
Love it.
So really simple, really easy to remember, but just know that there's never really any loss. So with that, Sophie.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I think, I don't know if all of us have, but I've definitely lost my job. And it was definitely a learning experience. And it definitely wasn't because I did anything particularly wrong. It was because purpose wise and competence wise, I didn't believe in the way other people wanted to take the direction of the company. The only problem was I wasn't really listening to the fact that they were going to boot me. So I got booted and it was quite unexpected. So I learned a lot from that, which is to actually see the
Become more
signs.
self-aware.
Yes, I became a lot more self-aware. But, you know, to your point, I learned a lot and I saw some magic on the other side. It was through community and connection that I didn't lose my confidence and I understood where I was supposed to go on my next adventures. So you will all have many adventures. So some of these things are meant to free us. I think I want to talk about resilience from a different kind of perspective, which is my team and through the lens of what I do, running the whiskies portfolio for Diageo. And I remember 2020 and sitting in numerous, being told, yeah, we're not coming back, take your computers off you go. And I was thinking, this is awesome. I've always wanted to have a couple of weeks at home. I'm really going to get into this. Then I was like, oh God, this is not ending. But anyway, the point was the whole conversation was budget cuts, doom and gloom, let's strip everything out of everything. And I remember sort of tuning into the computer and looking at my team, and it was just sort of never ending negativity about, cutting, the business is going to go through the floor, what's going to happen. And I remember sitting there thinking, in the face of crisis, there is always major opportunity to change something. And I think what we did as a team of people was rather than look to executives or leadership about where we were supposed to go, we decided what were we supposed to do in our business, okay? And sat back and said, there's a real opportunity to put purpose at the forefront of everything that we do. And we work in a business which is all about the trade that is getting crushed right now, restaurants, bars, clubs. So how do we actually turn our efforts towards working in those communities in a way that really helps? And we turned down media, we turned down marketing, we developed programs to help bartenders and restaurants and clubs. And it was kind of through that people got a really communal sense of energy and a real focus to do good in community, even though they were isolated in their house on a computer, being told that we had absolutely no money and the business was going to go through the floor. So, I think about resilience in a way of like, I guess when it gets really shitty, how do we use, and this is a room full of creative thinkers, our creativity and our purpose to drive programs that connect in an even more meaningful way than kind of the science of our business to do good? And I think that was one of the most enriching, fulfilling parts of that time for myself and for my team. We also spent a lot of time thinking about what gave us energy. And, when everything gets taken away, the ability to live in possibility, create and dream about the impact you can have, you had the time to do that. So how are we going to do that in the business? So my point is, like, I think everybody tells you to be resilient, but what are the tools to allow you to get there? Find the things that give you energy and create and live in possibility and connect in community and go back to purpose, because you'll get a lot of energy from it at times of toughness.
I love it. Thank you, Sophie. I want to stay with that theme. I want to stay with that theme around coping and pressure. And, we're in a very control centric kind of business. Yes, we do. We're A+ personalities. Valerie, can you talk to me a little bit about a failure that you've had? A failure that you've had? How did you deal with it? What are some of your coping or dealing mechanisms of failure?
I left a job that I had been in for 10 years. I left a job that I had been in for 10 years, had risen from VP associate creative director to executive creative director, VP, senior VP, to go to what seemed like a dream job. I am from Detroit, and after our agency did a project for Andre Harrell, who, unbeknownst to us at that time, was soon to become the CEO of Motown Records. Andre called me up, and I thought he was just calling about another project for the agency. And he said, "No, I want to talk to you." And he invited me out for a drink and spun the most incredible vision of continuing the legacy of Motown Records, which was unlike any other record label in history. Motown was such a brand due to the vision of Berry Gordy, who founded it, who took it from just being a record company to being an entertainment company and made movies like Lady Sings the Blues with Diana Ross and built some of the biggest and most enduring stars of their time. So here's Andre, filling my head with these visions of everything that the Motown brand can become and why he needed someone like me to come from the world of advertising and help take them there. So I had visions of a Motown clothing line, of kind of athleisure clothing line, of a young adult book series that was based on some of the girl groups that I knew that he had recruited, of a revival of something that was just seminal in my life, which was the Motown Review. When I must have been 13 because my brother was 16 and able to drive. So my mother let him have the car and he took us to Detroit to the Motown Review, where we saw every act on the Motown roster for, I think, about $3 at the Fox Theater in Detroit. Okay, so Andre is offering me a job where I can see bringing back the Motown Review, because Andre was trying to introduce a whole roster of new young groups at Motown. So anyway, I had this drink with him, at which P. Diddy, came and plopped down at the table, "Hey, am I late?" Just joking around. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I want to be part of this. I can see this." And so I floated home about, 2 feet off the ground and told my husband, Andre Harrell just offered me a job that I can't really think of any reason to refuse. But I still called in my kitchen cabinet, my girlfriends who were all very successful women, and said, "What do you think? What's the worst thing that can happen if I take this job? It's leaving advertising. It is doing that." And one of them said, "Well, the worst thing that I can see happening is that you wind up as just a department head at a record label." And I thought, okay, that I really don't want that. And when I went to that job, I don't think of Motown as being like my personal failure. I worked my entire contract, the last 6 months of it, remotely from California, just like taking swimming lessons and learning French. But
enriching yourself.
But our enterprise was a failure. It was not successful. And it was kind of a spectacular and personal failure to me, because Motown meant so much to me, as having absolutely grown up with that record label and watched it become all these things. And within that failure, speaking of resilience, I found myself from day one in a pretty chaotic situation. I learned that a record label is a business, sort of, like it's not a business like an advertising agency or a corporation. It is a business, and there's a huge amount of money involved, and it's very glamorous. It was a very cool job in a lot of ways. You fly first class all the time. You're driving around LA in a convertible and taking meetings with, big important people and, celebrities and all of that. And it was very cool in that way. But I considered it a failure in that I was not able to do all the stuff that Andre had recruited me to do, because for one thing, those rights had been negotiated away before I ever even joined the company. And I think he didn't really investigate that. But what I was able to do was like go in every day to this chaotic environment and go, what can I do for Motown today? And all of those things were pretty unusual. I had a girl group called Shades that unfortunately for them came out at the same time as Destiny's Child, and they did not have a Beyonce. They were like a group of real cute girls, but introducing the concept of marketing alliances, I was able to get them a contract with Clairol, which, you know, at least made these people at Motown who tended to be disdainful of anything that they didn't understand. A lot of the things that I was talking about then are standard industry practice now for the music industry, like marketing music online.
Yes.
Oh boy, you should have been in the meeting when I introduced that. They were like, oh yeah, right. And then we put our major clients out of business. You know, I was like, well, they went out of business. Been to Tower Records lately?
No,
You know,
right.
but I was just a little bit ahead of my time and not smart enough to know that like you shouldn't say every idea that you have in a big meeting like that, because, you know, you could end up sounding stupid. So there were a lot of failures like that, but also there was like the contract with Shades for Clairol, a custom compilations that were done for brands like Coors with our Mojazz label, a campaign against teenage tobacco use that was introduced with Secretary of Health and Human Services, Donna Shalala, on national television. So there were things that would not have happened at Motown if I hadn't been there, because they didn't think like that. These were unconventional ideas. So within what I consider kind of a real disappointing failure, the revival of the Motown Review did not happen, because despite the fact that Pepsi was totally on board from the first phone call that I made, one of my colleagues at Motown had his nose out of joint because I didn't know that business.
Right.
And I hadn't learned that the way to do something like that was I had to go to him first.
Right.
You know, he didn't come to my organizational meeting, which gave other people pause. And ultimately the project died, but it was still a great idea and with great corporate support. So there were things like that. There was a concert to rebuild the churches. I don't know if you remember, but in the mid-90s, there were a lot of Black churches that were just being burned.
Sure.
And Andre just said in a meeting one time, you know, we should do something about that. Well, by then I had learned to keep my mouth shut about my ideas. So I went up to him after the meeting and said, Andre, you know, I think I could get you a corporate sponsor for something like that. Well, I called up one of my old clients at a huge communications company, and I told him about this little idea that we had, a concert to rebuild the churches. And every notion that I had about it, he took and made bigger. We were talking about doing something at Planet Hollywood in LA. And he said, you know what? We have this geodesic dome that we put up for the Olympics in Atlanta, and we're leaving it up for a while for the enjoyment of the citizens. So we'd like to do it there. We were talking to somebody at Fox about televising, and he said, that would be nice, but you know, why don't you talk to our network guys? And we'll bring our business units, which are many, as sponsors to this program. So again, I floated back to my office. Only
this is a
to
pretty
find
epic fail, guys. Are you hearing how this failure is really epic?
only to find that my boss, who was not taking a meeting with me about this, was like, what are you nuts? And finally, what he said was, I don't want to do it. I didn't realize how much trouble he was in already with the parent company. I think they had already spent upwards of $200 million without producing like big hit making groups. He said, I don't want to do it because if it doesn't work, they'll blame me for it. And I said, okay. Then his assistant, who was the second most powerful person in the company, I'm telling you, came to me and said, you know, Andre wants you to do whatever you want to do about this, which scared me to death. Months later, probably, I'm sure my contract with the company was up and I was out in California. I kind of woke up in the middle of the night and thought, oh my God, you should have called Suzanne DePass, who has a contract she produced the Motown 25 special. She was absolutely the right person to call to do this. So even the failures that I have to acknowledge, like my failure to make that thing happen, I learned something from those. And I had an opportunity to tell Suzanne at the Acapulco Black Film Festival. I saw her and I said, you know, it dawned on me that I should have called you. And she said, yes, you
Yes, you should have.
yes, you should have.
Your connections.
But
for sure.
anyway, that whole job, that whole experience was both a big failure, a big success, a wonderful credential. I can still always say that I was Senior Vice President of Creative Services for Motown Records. So.
I love it. Thank you. What an awesome story. Bernice, you talked a lot about your emergence after 2020. Can you talk a little bit about what your new normal is and how do you now see the world? Got to believe that empathy is in your toolkit now.
Oh, for sure. Empathy is definitely in my toolkit now. I will say, because it was so trying, such a trying time for me, both on a personal and a professional level, right? When I did, kind of get to the other side of that hump, I was just so grateful to everyone who helped me along the way, right? And I think, Valerie, you were talking earlier, you said something about networking and connections. I like to talk. It's just who I am. So for me, it's easy to build connections, right? And genuine connections. Like I genuinely care for people. So during the pandemic, I found myself actually like reaching out to people. Some of my former clients from the agency, some of my former friends and colleagues, just, hey, are you okay? Are your parents okay? Are your kids okay? I know you live in Italy, or you have family in Italy. At that point, Italy was like the hub of COVID. Is your family okay? Right? I said, I have like, I'm counting every cent and every dollar that I have. I'm sending flowers to some of the people that are just taking time to talk to me, to encourage me and inspire me, right? So I think leaning on those connections, right? It's such a big thing. And it's something that I continue to do still today, right? Continue to forge these relationships and be genuine about it, right? And like you said, empathy, right? It was my first time ever losing a role, right? I was like, oh, that would never happen to me because I'm such a dedicated hard worker. Like I will go, like my job is, I'm not married, I'm single, right? I don't have any kids. My job is my baby, right? And so there is a lot of empathy now that I have, and I'm very self-aware of who Bernice is outside of just my role, right? I think as again, as a successful woman, for me, it was so important. Oh, I do this and I do that, and this is what I do, and this is how I contribute. And I'm so much more than that, actually. I'm a daughter. I go to church, and I was able to lean into my church community so much. In fact, in the middle of the pandemic, I had a prayer group. And in this prayer group, they're like, any prayer requests and any praises. And I just said, what? I've been unemployed for a few months. I think I may have to give up my apartment and move back home. And then someone in that prayer group actually reached out to me afterwards, just to like sidebar me. This is on Zoom. And they said, hey, give me your information. I just want to chat with you like shortly after this. And I said, okay, cool. So I reached out to this person. They said, hey, do you know so-and-so? He runs the New York City chapter of this mega church that I was attending. And, he owns an agency. Maybe you should just talk to him. I don't know that he'll have anything for you, but, just pick up and talk to him. So I did, and he introduced us, him and I talk, and he says, unfortunately, I don't have anything for you right now, right? Like it's a trying time. I don't actually have any clients, but I am working on this event. And it's going to be like a socially distanced because like you said, Monique, it's, it's trying times, right? We have BLM and, all of that going on. So he goes, I'm doing a socially distant event because the church has been way too quiet about what's going on and racial injustice. And I'm going to do it in Times Square. This is like August. And he's like, I could use your help just putting this event together. And I do, I help him do it. And at the end of it, he actually gives me a nice stipend. And he's like, you've been incremental, you've been amazing. Like I could not have pulled this off without you. Again, I still don't have anything for you, but here's something on behalf of me and my agency. And thank you for all your help. And it was like substantial, guys. Like, again, I'm counting every cent. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And I say that because again, you just never know. And I did it as a volunteer. Like I just wanted to do it. I wanted to use my skill set, right? To do something for make the world a better place, right? And here I was, and I was getting paid for it. I was like, oh, well, this is nice. Did not see that coming.
I'm beautiful. Nothing's by accident. If you're intentional, if you live integrity first, nothing's by accident. All right, Sophie.
Failures.
How
yeah.
are you coping? Give
think
us some of your jewels.
I think I've had a lot of failures, but I'm going to talk about actually something that I've been working on for a while, which is, we're in a room full of people who thrive on creativity, probably pretty passionate, have strong points of view about what they want to do and where they want to go and how they want to change the world or their environment. And one of the things that I really learned through the last 3 years is the impact of your style. And how you can influence the situation or the impact you have on others. And I think empathy is a fantastic thing to reflect on because one of the things that happened is everybody's in your house all of a sudden. That's never happened when you're working. You're sort of storming through the corridors or meeting people or at events, or you're totally in it and in a different environment. And I think the notion of having everybody sort of sitting in your living room or your work desk or your bedroom or wherever you had to work from really created a different sense of empathy and kind of connection with the teams that you're leading. And you had to work in a completely different way, I think, sort of listen with your eyes, be aware of who wasn't talking, what was going on with other people on screen, and then sort of connect through each of your vulnerabilities about how you were dealing with different things. And I think, if I reflect on it, one of the things I think is I get really overexcited about things and majorly passionate, and I storm into things and go, I don't know why we'd be doing things this way. There's 100 things we could do. Let's go. And it never occurred to me. And sometimes I think, how come I just said that? And then someone else is saying the same thing and people are going, oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's really cool. And I realized that sometimes my style is just completely overwhelming for people. They can't even listen to it and it's intimidating. And if I just would walk it back slightly and explain to people how I got to the excitement that I was at, why it would be really cool, how they could get involved, I'd probably get a lot more people going along with me. And I talk about that because I think I learned that the most when I got fired from Barbarian Group, because I was pretty clear on what the agency needed to do. I had terrific partners and we also had investors and we had parent companies, and they kept saying to me, yeah, no, we need to come and visit and we need to talk about what we're going to do next. So I was like, there's no need for that visit. Like, we don't need that visit. We got this. We know exactly where we're going and I know exactly what I'm doing with this company. Yeah, nice. That was great. Have a nice life. Anyway, one morning I woke up, I was making my cup of tea in the kitchen and they walked in and I said, oh, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, we come to see you. Yes, we're transitioning you from CEO. I said, oh, what will I be doing? And this is no joke. I was so in my own head about my own ideas and where I was going. they said, well, you'll be training this person to take over. I said, oh, I don't think I want to do that. So off I went. Anyway, my point is like, be very aware. We're talking about resilience and we're talking about being effective. We're talking about failures and we're talking about the fact that really your story is not a failure. Your story is not a failure. My story is not a failure. It's about learning how you have impact and how you can influence and how you can move through situations. And that was, I can tell you, one of the most rocking moments of my career. And I'm well and truly on the other side of it, but I have and I do stop and think about the influence of my style, how I'm engaging in a situation, because mostly I'm just overexcited about doing really cool shit, right? And so how's that going to offend anybody?
Right. How could that be
But,
bad?
perhaps stop and think about how you're going to take people on that journey, and you might come out a little bit better than I did in that situation.
You're awesome. Oh, thank you. So we're gonna round this out. We're gonna round this out with just some final thoughts. I'd love to talk about what did you leave behind in the pandemic, and then what are you going to do differently moving forward? So for me, just as an example, I decided I am never going to travel across this country for a 1-hour meeting ever again. Not never. We can do that on Zoom, Teams, Blue Jeans, whatever you want to call it, FaceTime, all of that can happen. I'm not moving for less than 3 hours and a meal. Right? Feed me. So that was a huge lesson that I learned. I was killing myself for things that weren't necessarily incrementally doing anything. Right? So I'd love to leave this audience with that.
Sure. What I left behind was, I think, this need to have validation through my role, right? My opportunity. Like, I'm so much more than, XYZ at XYZ. No, I'm so much more than that, right? So really tapped into that. And what I do differently now is, I am more conscious to be aware of things like, well, you're going through something, but your mom might be going through something at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, like, don't be so self-absorbed. There's a lot of growth in the 2020 and the pandemic for me, for sure.
Well, you stole my first line. It was like the need for validation through a job. I left that behind. I think I've left behind my fears of aging out of my industry. Somewhere I realized that age isn't the enemy, irrelevance is. When I only work now on things that I find interesting. I work on the issue of diversity, and I do a lot of work for the NBA because I'm a basketball fan and because it's cool and because I know that for a person of my age, to be a real creative resource to the National Basketball Association is kind of unexpected, so I left behind the need to be validated by a job title. That's a luxury that you have, though, once you've had that job title.
That's right. That's right.
And I do realize that. And I left behind the notion that I could never be replaced. I'm like, Sophie, I lost that one job when I was expecting a big raise because my department was the only thing that the agency was known for at that time. But it was like, again, my overwhelming personality and my sense that I knew where the company should go was the key to my undoing there. So that's what I've left behind. Please leave behind the fear of aging out.
Yeah. That's such a awesome statement. You kind of stole one of my things. I don't know if I left things behind. I'm sure I did, but like, I can't remember things, but like